Hello, this is the last basic video explaining the unit circle, or last video that essentially just explains the unit circle. So in the last two videos, talked about how to find the degree measure of everything on the unit circle, and after that, how to find the radian measure. So what this video is going to focus on is how do you find the x and y coordinate points. Well, the reason the unit circle is called the unit circle is because it's a circle centered around the x and y axis with a radius of 1. So what does that mean? Well, that means that basically the distance from the center to any endpoint is 1. So from here, from my center to my end over here would be 1. From my center right up here would also be 1. From here to here is 1, and from here to here is 1, because these are all essentially radii of the same circle. All right, well, if that distance 1, what does that mean? Well, we know that this center point here, keep choosing the same colors, let me pick something a little different, that the center point here is the point 0, 0. Well, if I go one whole point to the right of the point 0, 0, I'm not moving in the y direction, because I'm not moving up or down. I'm only moving in the x direction. So this point over here could be the point 1, 0, because my x has increased by 1 as I move to the right, but my y hasn't changed. Very similarly, going to the left side, my x changes, but my y doesn't. So it would be negative 1, 0, because it's moved one space to the left. At the top of the unit circle, the x point remains the same, 0, because I've only moved up from the origin. I've not moved left or right. And my y unit would be 1. By a very similar method, moving down, x would be 0. Y would be negative 1. So these are, again, the easiest points. And just like how in the previous videos I started with filling these out for degrees and radians, I think it's always a good place to start with the quadrantals. Now, going around the unit circle, what is the best way to do it? So I've worked with a lot of students. I've seen a lot of people like different things, but what I found to be the quickest, the easiest, and the one that requires you to memorize the least is to memorize the following series of numbers. So these numbers are 0, 1/2, root 2 over 2, root 3 over 2, and 1. Oops, over 2. So why are these numbers important? Well, these numbers are important is because these numbers are essentially your x values and your y values on the unit circle. So let's get started. We're going to start just by doing all the x values. So I'm going to put little parentheses in here and here, here and here and here and here. Okay, so what happens to the x values as we move along the unit circle? So as I'm going from here and I'm moving up along this outer edge here, what's happening to my x coordinates? Well, remember, the x coordinate is a measure of its tendency to move to the right or to the left. As I come up this line, this curved line here, I'm moving in two directions. I'm both moving up, which tells me that my y value is increasing, and I'm moving left, which tells me that my x value is decreasing. And I can see from looking at the unit circle that my x value must decrease from 1 down to 0. So because of that, I'm going to essentially use these numbers up here and just go this way, because my x value is decreasing. It's getting closer to 0. So as I go from 1 to 0, the first number up here, as you could see, would be the square root of 3 over 2. And I don't think I left myself enough room here. Let me change this really quick. Let me make this one a little bit bigger so it's clear for you to see it. So I know that's a different color, but this would be in the x value, root 3 over 2. Then as I'm moving along my number line, root 2 over 2, and then 1/2 will come next. Well, let's look at what's happening with the y values. Well, the y values are going from 0 to 1. They're increasing, so therefore I'm going to increase as I move from 0 to 1 here. I'm moving from 0 to 1, so I move from 0 to 1. So this would be 1/2. This would be root 2 over 2. And this would be root 3 over 2. Another important thing to note is that anywhere where x is root 2 over 2, y is also going to be root 2 over 2. So I realized I've taken up some space here that I might need, so I'm going to go ahead and just erase some of this, try to make a little bit more room, but try to still leave those numbers there. Okay, now here I'm in the second quadrant. So in the second quadrant, I can see that I'm to the left of the y-axis, so all my x values are going to be negative. So I'm gonna erase these numbers up here because I do need that space. I'm gonna move them down to the bottom right corner. We move them down here. Okay, so now that I'm in this quadrant, I'm just gonna go ahead and put a negative in front of all my x values, and I'm gonna let my y values remain positive because of where I am. Okay, so here I'm going from 0 down to -1. Now I'm going to look at this graph here, and I'm not going to worry about the negatives just per se, but I'm going to look at the fact that I'm going from 0 to 1 in my x coordinates. I'm going from 0 to really -1, but that's already accounted for by the negative. So what's going to go here is 1/2. What's going to go here is √2/2. What's going to go here is √3/2, and then I get to -1. Can you see? I really hope it's clear that you're seeing how I'm essentially just bobbing back and forth amongst these number lines. My y coordinates are going to be very similar. They're going from 1 down to 0, so I'm going to be going the other way. I'm going to be going from 1, √3/2, √2/2, 1/2, and then I get to 0. In this next quadrant here, obviously lacking some foresight with where I'm putting these arrows and numbers. But here I'm in the third quadrant. So what do I know about the third quadrant? Well, I know that both x and y are negative. So I'm going to go ahead and as I draw these, I'm going to put negative, comma, negative, negative, comma, negative, negative, comma, negative. So big spaces, but hoping it's becoming clear what's going on. So here, my x coordinates are going from -1 to 0. So I hop along the number line that way. So this would be -√3/2, √2/2, and 1/2. And then I get to 0. My y values are going up, so it'd be -1/2, √2/2, √3/2. And then finally, I'm in my fourth quadrant. I'm going to go ahead and remove this. You should memorize it, so skip back in the video if you need it. But now that I'm in my fourth quadrant, I know that my x value is positive and my y value is negative. So I'm going to go ahead and just put all that in here. And again, in the x value, I'm going from 0 to 1. So this would be 1/2. This would be √2/2. This would be √3/2. And then as I'm going from -1 to 0, this would be -√3/2, -√2/2, and -1/2. Something else worth noticing is that 0 is less than 1/2, is less than √2/2, is less than √3/2, is less than 1. As I get basically closer to 0, I'm going closer to 1/2. As I go closer to 1, I'm getting closer to √3. Something else to recognize that's very important is that √2 is always paired with √2, and √3/2 is always paired with 1/2. Now the signs might change in front of those, but if you know your x is √3/2, you don't know what your y is, it's 1/2. If you have 1/2, the other one's definitely √3/2. You can see that pattern as it emerges here. So I hope you found that helpful. In the next videos, I'm going to do a few example problems of how you can use the unit circle.